Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. Today there is an opposition aspect between Venus and Uranus. And what I want to do is look at the opposition between Venus and Uranus, look at what it might mean, especially in a natal chart, and also consider some famous people who have got Venus opposition Uranus in their charts. Now, one person who has got Venus opposition Uranus is Robert Kennedy Jr., and I will be looking at his chart. But I just first of all want to give a brief sort of flavour of what Venus opposition Uranus might mean in certain situations. And I just want to quickly look at the Wikipedia entry on Robert Kennedy Jr.'s marriages and children. So let's just see what it says, just to get an idea. So on April the 3rd, 1982, Kennedy married Emily Ruth Black, whom he had met at the University of Virginia School of Law, and they had 2 children. Then on April the 15th, 1994, Kennedy married Mary Kathleen Richardson aboard a research vessel on the Hudson River. That's a very sort of Venus-Uranus opposition place to get married. They had 4 children. So on May the 12th, 2010, Kennedy filed for divorce from Mary. 3 days later, she was charged with drunk driving. On May the 16th, 2012, Mary was found dead in a building on the grounds of her home in Bedford, New York. The Westchester County Medical Examiner ruled the death to be a suicide due to asphyxiation from hanging. Later it was reported that Mary had seen Kennedy's personal journal from 2001, in which he recorded his sexual encounters with 37 different women. Kennedy married his third wife, actor-director Cheryl Hines, on August 2nd, 2014. So that gives a sort of flavour of Kennedy and his wives, his marriages, and if we believe this report about his journal, it's his sexual encounters with 37 different women, and he wrote them all down, and his second wife read about them, and apparently this led to her suicide. Or at least that's a possibility. But anyway, before I look at Venus opposition Uranus, I want to look at what's going on astrologically today, which is Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. So here is the chart for today. So we are on the cusp of the solstice. It's about to happen. By the way, I should say in astrology, there's no such thing as a cusp. Either you're on one side of the cusp or you're on the other side. You can't be a sort of a mixture of, say, Sagittarius and Capricorn. There is a precise moment where the sun moves into Capricorn. It's a sort of a millisecond. Not even a millisecond. It's instantaneous. So you can't be both have your sun both in Sagittarius and Capricorn. Now, as far as the sign change from from Sagittarius to Capricorn, for most people on Earth, it happens tomorrow on Friday. However, if you are in the Americas, then it does happen tonight, Thursday night. To be precise, if you are if you're in New York, the winter solstice, by definition, the moment the sun moves into Capricorn, is at 10:27 p.m. If you are in Los Angeles, or sort of Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Vancouver, whether that's Vancouver, Washington State, or Vancouver in Canada, then it's going to be at 7:27 p.m. So if you're in the Americas and you want to celebrate the solstice, you've got some precise times there. And it's a very reasonable time to celebrate the solstice. You don't have to get up at some terrible hour in the morning as you would have to do if you are, say, in London. Because if you're in London, the solstice is at 3:27 tomorrow morning, a.m. Yeah, a.m. On Friday. So that's a solstice. If you're in the Americas, then happy solstice. So that's the first thing going on. Second thing, moon is still in moon is still in Aries for most of the day. In fact, all of the day if you're outside the Americas. If you're in the Americas, moon goes into Taurus about 9:50 p.m. in New York tonight, and at 6:50 p.m. In Los Angeles. So the moon is kind of, at the end of Aries. It's not doing a great deal. Yes, it makes a square of Pluto, but Pluto is a sort of a traditional planet, and essentially the moon has made its last major aspect to a traditional planet. And so, I think for many of us with the moon in late Aries, we want things to happen. We're quite keen for action, but it might just not materialize. Now, probably the most important aspect today is a Venus opposition Uranus. Now, at the end of this video, after I've done the I Ching, I'll be looking at Venus opposition Uranus in more detail. But Venus is a planet of relationships, and sort of Uranus is a planet of turmoil, revolution, whatever. So in terms of one-to-one relationships, there could be a certain amount of instability. It's in fixed signs. Venus is in Scorpio, Aquarius. Venus is in Scorpio, and Uranus is in Taurus. So it's very fixed, but quite stubborn. And so one-to-one relationships could be difficult. You or your partner might really want to stick to your guns. I hope not literally stick to your guns, but really not be prepared to compromise. So you need to watch out for that. Venus is also the planet of money. Watch out for unexpected expenditure. Spending money on things. Something comes your way, you think, oh yeah, that would be a good thing to spend money on, this credit card or whatever. Just don't do it. So that's something you have to watch out for with Venus opposition Uranus. So it can create a bit of instability, but with the moon right in the last degrees of Aries, maybe this instability won't really manifest into sort of a full-blown, World War III or whatever, or the interpersonal equivalent of World War III. So another aspect which kind of creates a bit of instability is Mars quincunx Uranus. Quincunx 150 degrees aspect. There's Mars 1943 Sagittarius, Uranus 1939 Taurus. So a quincunx is a difficult aspect. Reason being because you're dealing with two signs that really have nothing to do with each other. Mars in Sagittarius Uranus in Taurus. Sagittarius and Taurus, two signs are completely different from each other. And as a pair, Mars and Uranus can be quite violent. And it kind of adds to the tension of that Venus opposition Uranus. And you can probably see this thing as a sort of a broader configuration. You know, you've got Venus opposition Uranus and Mars opposition Mars quincunx Uranus. I don't know. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to be really negative and over imaginative about it, I suppose you could call this. I don't know. You could call this configuration the rifle, because there's the barrel of the gun, and there's the stock. So yeah, there's a rifle forming today. Maybe I've just created a new astrological formation, and so this rifle involving Uranus at the tip of the gun, the Venus and Mars on the stock is there, and it's yeah, I suppose thinking about it, it could actually be quite violent, because you've got Mars quincunx Uranus, Venus opposition Uranus. It's this this rifle formation could cause a lot of instability in relationships. So I'm kind of changing my mind on this a bit. I think it is quite difficult. I think in any form of relationship, you have to be really, really careful with these aspects forming together. We had the semi-sextile, because don't forget, we had the semi-sextile, but the exact semi-sextile between Venus and Mars was yesterday. But it's still in action. So to get the rifle formation, you have to have an opposition, then you have to have a semi-sextile, and then you have to have the quincunx there. So watch out with relationships. So you have to be careful there. So that's what's going on there. And on a different note, and a more positive note, Mercury is sextile Saturn. So there is Mercury, there is Saturn. So that represents concentration. So if we can somehow remove ourselves from some of that interpersonal chaos and just concentrate on something like, I don't know, maybe doing some quiet reading or studying or having a serious conversation, Mercury in Capricorn, sextile Saturn, that creates a possibility of mental discipline. So maybe what we should be doing today is, looking at what's going on astrologically and focusing on the good, focusing on the positive. And the positive is that Mercury sextile Saturn, studying, serious conversation, not being distracted by all the trivia and chaos around us. Now, as far as midpoints are concerned, the Sun is about to move into Capricorn. That means the Sun is starting to square the Aries point. So there's the Sun, and there's Mars. So Sun and Mars are actually sort of around 10 degrees apart. That in itself is important, 10 degrees, because 10 degrees is 1/36 of the circle. So 1/36 of the circle. So you think about that. That's, I suppose, 36. How would you see that? 4 times 9 is 36. Is that right? 4 times 9 is 36. It's about the struggle to find Transcendence 9 and transcendence 9 is a transcendence number. So you have 4 times 9 is 36. So that struggle. How do you find transcendence in violence? Okay, that's one way of looking at it. I think some people might have fantasies about violence. Okay, so you can go watch Clockwork Orange or something. So Neptune is square the Sun-Mars midpoint. Yes, that could be fantasies about violence. Some people, are going to be attracted to that kind of thing. It seems to me extremely dangerous, particularly as Neptune. It's not Neptune is square the Sun-Mars midpoint. It's also square the Aries-Mars midpoint. It's about getting into situations which become violent, which without even thinking about it. And so I think, again, we have to be very careful there. Just don't do anything dangerous. But it's probably not about you. It's just about other people. And it's like what's going on in the world. People just doing crazy stuff, not thinking about the consequences of what they're doing, and glorifying violence and thinking violence is an end in, is almost something to dissolve into, an end in itself. So I think that Neptune square the Sun Mars and the Aries Mars midpoint it could be problematic in certain places, but I think if we all lead nice, normal, safe lives, we should be okay. Okay, so having looked at the broad situation astrologically, I want to consider the 12 signs. So, let's see. So here are my forecasts for today, which is Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. Aries. Yes, you're doing the right thing and your impulses can be trusted, provided you're not doing anything that's actually dangerous. So a bit of judgment is required. And the danger arises from a 150-degree aspect between Mars and Uranus. The coast ahead seems clear, but there is an obstacle that could throw you off course. Keep your eyes open. Taurus. Venus, your ruler, is making an opposition aspect to Uranus across the main axis of your solar chart. There could be electric events involving other people. Responses can't be predicted, and relationships could be the source of major disruption and excitement. So in social situations, have fun, but be ready for anything. Gemini. It's a time when you need to be considering other people's needs, particularly the needs of your friends. It might seem a pain doing what someone else wants and not what you want, but you'll quickly understand how it all fits together. Just because nothing happens doesn't mean that you're wasting your time. Cancer. Just keep ploughing on. You've got everything under control, and ideally you'll focus on the present, rather than regret the past or speculate about the future. But it's important to be imaginative, because the outside world won't give you much feedback. Friends and colleagues are independent-minded. Leo, you've enjoyed doing something, but now you have to work out where you're going with it. If you go any further, it's going to take time and commitment, and it might not be as fun as it used to be. Elsewhere, someone's erratic behaviour could cause a few delays, perhaps at home, perhaps in the workplace. Virgo. There is something you need to find out about, and it needs some detailed research. It's something you can do, and it won't take as long as expected. Your first inclination is to focus on something else, but it's a situation where knowledge is important. You need to get that knowledge now. The facts are not quite as they seem. Libra. Your finances need some care and attention, and you need to watch out for unplanned expenses. After all, Venus, your ruler, is opposition Uranus across the finance axis of your solar chart. Things can just happen, and slips of concentration could be expensive. Don't buy things on a whim, and make sure you stick to your budget. Scorpio. You're feeling somewhat dissatisfied. Maybe the things you're involved with are tedious. You may even be asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing, but it's a day when you need to stick with it, and perhaps you'll get grim satisfaction with any small gains that you're able to notch up. Other people are behaving erratically. Sagittarius. Today you could waste a lot of time. You're looking for action, but you could so easily scatter your energy, doing one thing, then another thing, then another thing, but never staying with it for long enough to get concrete results. So perhaps you have to decide on what's important and then give it everything you've got. Capricorn. You've got a list that you want to get through, but accomplishing your various tasks could be difficult. You might think that everything is well organised, but people and events can't be planned for. Though, if you're looking for stability, you should take control of your environment and not rely on promises being kept. Aquarius. Just because you say something doesn't mean that you'll be listened to. With so many words flying around, there's competition for attention, and messages won't be properly understood unless they are packaged in exactly the right way. If you're working, solid grounding is more important than spectacular progress. Pisces. It's always worth thinking about the broader picture, looking beyond money and success to consider the underlying reason for it all. And perhaps the direction you've chosen for yourself is not 100% satisfactory. While you don't have to change course, you might start considering a few adjustments. Okay, so that's the day from a perspective of astrology. So now I want to consider the day from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is today, Thursday, going to be like for those watching this video? So let's see what's going on. Okay, so the first hexagram I got for today is hexagram 35, progress. That's what we're going to be trying to achieve. All of us, in our own ways, are trying to make progress today. We don't want it to be a dead day. We don't want it to be a day where nothing happens. Unfortunately, it's going to be tough. You know, we've got our plans for today, and we've got a moving line, second line from bottom moves, and to begin with, it will be like nothing is happening. You know, we try, we put the work in, but we just feel that we're completely blocked. And so the temptation here might be to just give up. But we do have to keep going. Just keep moving in that the one direction that you've chosen for yourself. Remember, you know, it's not just Sagittarius that has to worry about scattering its energies today. You know, all the 12 signs, that could be an issue, particularly when we've got progress as progress blocked here. You know, yeah, it's nice having progress as a hexagram, but when the second line is moving, that does suggest it's going to be difficult. But keep moving, and then the fifth line moves, and that's quite a good line. It means that eventually we're going to start making things move. Just our perseverance is going to pay off. I mean, it's not like there's going to be fireworks, but we will get the rewards we deserve. And so, as the day progresses, we will make progress. But there is a movement. This whole hexagram of progress does move to a new hexagram, and it moves to conflict. So by the end of the day, we're going to be aware that, whatever gains we've made, that there is still a problem. We're up against resistance. Someone is trying to really, or something, or the situation is trying to stop us getting what we want. This might lead to a conflict situation, and we might find that we start having a lot of complaints. That there's something going on which just doesn't seem to be fair, and we have to work out how to deal with it. If things aren't fair, we do have to express our feelings. This could lead to a conflict. And it may be a situation where we need to get some outside help. If something really isn't working, if we're just being stopped, treated unfairly, we've got this litany of complaints about what's going on in the world and how we're not allowed to achieve everything we want to achieve. It may be that, for example, one phone call to the right person can solve the problem for us. Maybe it's talking about mediation or something like that. So the I Ching is suggesting overall it may not be a great day. There's a lot to deal with. Yes, we'll make progress in the end, but it'll be hard work. And even then we might have complaints. So that kind of links up with the astrology. There's some difficult stuff going on astrologically. I talked about Venus opposition Uranus, this sort of rifle configuration involving Venus and Mars and Uranus. That does create problems. But astrologically, we do have this Mercury sextile Saturn today, which that's about the patience that we need. If we're going to make real progress today, we are going to have to be patient and persistent, and we mustn't be over dramatic about it. Okay, so that's the I Ching, and now I'm going to look at the Venus opposition Uranus aspect in general. Just what might it mean? And so I'll be looking at. I'm now going to look at some famous people who have got Venus opposition Uranus and see how it might be working out in their life. Now, I talked about Robert Kennedy at the beginning and his marital life, and Robert Kennedy, here is his chart. There's his chart, Robert Kennedy. I'm sorry these charts suddenly disappear under the horizon, under the screen. I have to build them up. There's something wrong with this program. I need to fix it. So there's Robert Kennedy's chart. You can see that he's got Venus at 24 Capricorn, and he's got Uranus at 20 Cancer. So he's got Venus opposition Uranus. Robert Kennedy also has Sun conjunct Venus. Now, interestingly, another person who has got Sun conjunct Venus opposition Uranus. Any guess? Want to guess who's got Sun conjunct Venus opposition Uranus? Yes, your favorite president. Yeah, him, Joe Biden. There's Joe Biden's chart. Joe Biden has got Sun conjunct Venus, opposition Uranus. So the two men have got something in common. I think, and I think that in both of those cases, we know, in Joe Biden's case, he's got Venus opposition Uranus, and we know that that might be indicative of his first wife dying in the December of the 18th, 1972 car accident. By the way, did you notice that there was, when Biden, it was a few days ago that Biden, I think it was in Wilmington, Delaware, that this car crashed into Biden's cavalcade, and so I think that was on December the 17th, and it was pretty close to the 51st anniversary. It was within a day of the 51st anniversary of the car crash that killed his wife. I just thought that was interesting. I didn't think it was interesting enough to have a special video on it. It didn't quite, it was. I think it's just a coincidence. But anyway, I thought I'd just point that out. So Sun conjunct Venus, as I've said about Sun conjunct Venus in a man's chart, it can be about mistreatment of women. Very simply because, Venus is a planet of women. It's a female planet. The Sun, it's a male planet. It also burns up what touches it. So Sun-Venus conjunction is about mistreating women, and I've talked about with Biden, Anita Hill as well. But with Joe Biden, it's opposition Uranus. So that might indicate. I'm not saying he mistreated his first wife, but if she hadn't married him, she might well still be alive. Just that was his fate, to to marry someone who died in a car crash. And that's the Sun conjunct Venus, Venus opposition Uranus. Now notice it's a disassociate Venus opposition Uranus. It's the natural opposition to Venus at 28 Scorpio is 28 Taurus, but actually his Uranus is in Gemini. But still, they are within 5 degrees of an opposition. So going back to Robert Kennedy Jr., like Biden, he had a wife who died in bad circumstances. She committed suicide, and he has his son. So whatever. Now, but I should say, by the way, I know a lot of people watching are big fans of Robert Kennedy Jr. How someone behaves in their personal life has nothing to do with whether or not they should be elected to office. So, you choose someone because they're good for the country. Sometimes people are good for their country and they have terrible personal lives and they treat people close to them really badly. So it's not. I'm not making any political point here. I must stress that. So with Robert Kennedy Jr., Sun-Venus conjunction, he certainly has the capacity, I believe, for mistreating women or maybe objectifying them. If what we read in Wikipedia is right, and he wrote all his, he wrote about all these women who he'd had sexual relations with, if that's true, it kind of fits the chart. That's Sun conjunct Venus. He was, if it's true, but he was betraying, I think, his second wife. And then this is opposition Uranus. That is the event where she committed suicide. So I think that in his case, Venus opposition Uranus, that is how it's is part of how it's working out. Now, I'm focusing here on relationships. So that's the obvious way of looking at Venus opposition Uranus. So if you've got if you've got Venus, Venus is about how you relate, particularly in one-to-one relationships. It's opposition Uranus, so it's going to be potentially unstable. You're going to be independent-minded. It may be someone with Venus opposition Uranus may have problems with monogamy. Maybe, not in all cases, but it's possible. But however hard one tries, someone with Venus opposition Uranus may well have drama in their various relationships, but not always. So that's one way of looking at Venus opposition Uranus. In a way, it's kind of the obvious way of looking at it. But Venus can also be about aesthetics. It's how one sees the world, how one wants to arrange the world. And you might have a vision of the world that you might want to impose on everyone else, which brings me to the chart of Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs has Venus opposition Uranus. You can see he has Venus in Capricorn, 21 Capricorn, Uranus at 24 Cancer. Now, I've no idea about what was going on in his relationships. I don't really want to discuss that. It's more about him as someone who is clearly obsessed about aesthetics. So what the iPhone, all that kind of stuff, what it looks like. He didn't want to have buttons, and he had a clear idea about aesthetics, which he wanted to impose on everyone else. And he was able to make money, huge amounts of money, by imposing his ideas about aesthetics on everyone else. So I think that might be how it worked in Steve Jobs' case, because design was everything. And so if you've got Venus opposition Uranus, your ideas about aesthetics may be very individual, very particular, might be very particular to you. Now, another person who had Venus opposition Uranus is probably someone you've never heard of, particularly if you're not if you haven't studied British history. And he is Judge Jeffreys. I was surprised he came up. I didn't really know. I'd kind of forgotten I'd put his data in. Now, Judge Jeffreys was what we call a hanging judge. He was born in 1645, and then we do get hanging judges. You've got hanging judges in the US, you've got hanging judges in the UK, and where else? The Soviet Union in the purges, you had people described as hanging judges. Nazi Germany, the guy who sentenced, for example, the bomb plot, had them all, they were hanged. A lot of hanging, indeed sometimes being hanged with piano wire. A real hanging judge so it's a concept, a hanging judge. And Judge Jeffreys was a hanging judge, and he was a judge in the reign of James II, and there was a rebellion by Monmouth's rebellion, and there was a battle at Sedgemoor in 1685, and and as a result, the rebels, I think in Winchester, there was what is now known as the Bloody Assizes, where the rebels went on trial, and I think most of them were hanged, and Judge Jeffreys was the guy in charge. This period of history is actually quite important to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, you think it's a very American thing, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms and all this kind of stuff. But actually, if you look at these heavy constitutional cases about the Second Amendment, the Americans might think that they're independent and it all started in 1776, but actually they go back to the reign of James II when you had a tyrannical king, and you're talking about the English gentleman's right to bear arms against a tyrannical king, and one of the faces of the tyrannical king, James II, was Judge Jeffreys, and obviously I don't have a time of birth for him. So, I mean, I know he's got Venus in Taurus, but you can see this guy had a huge amount of Gemini. He was born on a new moon, sun, moon. Obviously, we didn't know about Pluto. They didn't even know about Uranus then, of course. This was before he died, before Uranus was discovered. But he had sun, moon, Jupiter and Mercury in Gemini, as well as Pluto and Chiron. So I'm just going to, rather than just set the noon time, I'm going to set the chart for the lunation before birth, which was his birthday. I mean, he's born May the 25th. He was actually born May 15th on the Julian calendar, which is May the 25th Gregorian. So here, the hanging judge, the new moon before he was born, there's his Venus opposition Uranus. He has Venus exactly on the midheaven that morning, on the new moon of his birthday. I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but Venus is conjunct Algol. Algol is the Medusa's head. When that thick star, when Perseus cut off the Gorgon's head, held it aloft, and Algol is in Taurus. It's very much connected with the throat. So I do think you can see someone with the Venus on the midheaven on the day of his birth. That is someone who perhaps made his name through his hangings, and then Venus opposition Uranus. There's Uranus in Scorpio. Even by the standards of the time, this was by the standards of the time. You could be hanged for very small crimes, misdemeanors in modern parlance. But you could be hanged for very small crimes, yes. But he was notorious. He made his name in the history books for the bloody assizes where he hanged loads of people, and he was a hanging judge. And yes, he had Venus on the midheaven, opposition Uranus. I said, even by the standards of his time, his sentences were considered to be draconian. And he died. I think he died in the Tower of London of kidney problems. He was arrested after the James II's regime fell. So I don't know. Kidney problems, could that be Venus opposition Uranus? I don't know. I mean, that's just a possibility. So who else has got Venus opposition Uranus? If you've been following politics in the UK, I've got an example from the UK, and I've got an example from the US of two female politicians. Suella Braverman, she was the Home Secretary. She took a very hard line on immigration. And in the end, I suppose she became something of a maverick. Very critical of the government, having been sacked as Home Secretary. A lot of people, I suppose a lot of people on the left can't stand her. Now, if you've got a woman with Venus opposition Uranus, Venus is a female planet. So it's less likely to be projected. It's hers, and she has got Venus in Taurus opposition Aquarius. Opposition Uranus in Scorpio. Probably Venus in Taurus. I don't have a time of birth for her. I think there's a small chance if she was born at the end of the day that her Venus was in Gemini, but on the face of it, she does have Venus opposition Uranus. So another way that Venus opposition Uranus can work is someone who just bucks the trend. I mean, I think in the case of Robert Kennedy with his Venus opposition Uranus, he is someone who's bucking the trend. He's just not following the party line. He is being an individual. Okay, some accuse him of getting involved in conspiracy theories and all this kind of stuff, but he's being his own, he's being his own man, and that can be Venus opposition Uranus. Venus, I know I'm sort of going all over the place, but Venus is the balance, particularly the Libran aspect of it. So if you've got Venus opposition Uranus, if Venus is harmony, you might want to just upset the balance, and that may be how Venus opposition Uranus can work. I think Robert Kennedy, that's what he is doing. Suella Braverman, upsetting the balance. You have this sort of consensus about immigration, and you don't really talk about it much. But then she's sticking her neck out, and in the process getting fired, but certainly having a big impression. Another female politician who has Venus opposition Uranus is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, she is a congresswoman from Georgia, and I think she got into politics through her, I think she got into conspiracy theories, QAnon, all of that kind of stuff. And there's her Venus pretty closely opposition Uranus, very close Venus opposition Uranus. So again, because she's female, Venus is a female planet, it's hers. She doesn't project it. And so, yes, I know she's got the sun in Gemini, but, that might be a projected planet, but she really is Venus in Aries. Venus in Aries is someone who wants to assert themselves. It's opposition Uranus in Libra. That's perhaps upsetting the balance. Saying things that people don't want to hear. Going against the mainstream narrative. So that might be how Venus opposition Uranus works. Perhaps particularly in a female chart. I know Robert Kennedy is obviously a male chart, but I think when you've got a woman with Venus opposition Uranus, they really are not projecting at Venus, and they really are able to go against the narrative. I know she gets a lot of criticism, but she's just living out her chart. And of course, in her case, if you look at her Marjorie Taylor Greene's chart, she's got Venus opposition Uranus, and she's got Mars square Venus, Mars square Uranus. So it's almost part of a T square as well. So I think that might be another way in which Venus opposition Uranus is working. I should want to say, I know that Marjorie Taylor Greene gets a lot of criticism, but one thing I think that she did for her credit was to, at a relatively early stage, to raise serious questions about what's going on in America's proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. I think she questioned it, and further, she made some, unlike pretty much every other politician in the West, she actually considered why Russia might have gone into Ukraine. It wasn't just a random act of aggression. There was actually a legitimate grievance, which I think Marjorie Taylor Greene actually sort of recognised. And so you might think of a lot of her policies might, or at least conspiracy theories and all this might seem a bit crazy, but she had the independent mindedness to really spot something that was going on in the world where the US was just completely out of order. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about Venus opposition Uranus. I must stress that these charts are charts that I have found interesting. These are charts that over the last few years that I've had on in my program, that I have found interesting. So it's in a way, there's a lot of selection bias in there. But nonetheless, I think they do give us a flavour of how the Venus-Uranus opposition is working. Okay, so yeah, that's it. So if you've enjoyed this video, then yeah, please like it. If you've enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, then I would be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Anyway, thanks for listening again. And yeah, if you're in the Americas, happy solstice, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.